Awesome. We have a whole team.
Well, there are those
Welcome. Thank you
faces.
so much, you guys. We've got a full house today, so we've got a good lineup of folks who are here to learn a bit from this team of experts about how construction industry partnerships get organized, and what some of the important elements are in helping those things come together. We're going to learn from their experiences and have an opportunity when we come to the end for a Q&A session. We do currently, just housekeeping items, have everybody who is here as an attendee on mute. And we will open things up later in the presentation for questions and answers. But just for the seamlessness of the presentation, we did put everybody who is here as an attendee on mute. So just know that if you have a question, you can always put it in the chat area. And you could also raise your hand if there's something that you feel you need to ask and you don't want to put it in the chat area, and we can come back to you. So I think that's, as long as everybody knows where the chat function is, down there at the bottom of your screen, you just pop that open and type away. So real briefly, the conversation today is going to, as I said, focus on construction industry partnerships in the workforce development space. And construction is oftentimes one of those areas that, as workforce development boards, we struggle a bit with in figuring out how to connect to industry and how to well prepare candidates for movement into occupations in that industry. And so we do have some folks here today who have years and years of experience in working in that space. And so we'll have the opportunity to hear from them about what that has been like for them and some examples of successful projects that have that they've been able to be engaged in. And so just really briefly, just wanted to touch on a couple of facts that we probably all know. So first of all, you know, construction is one of those industries that focuses on the development of structures. That includes both housing construction as well as vertical construction. So there are really kind of two sides to that industry. In the construction industry, generally folks come into that through, in terms of entering an occupation, through an apprenticeship program. And so, as we are all aware, there's been a big focus on registered apprenticeship at the federal level, and we've been very engaged in registered apprenticeship across our consortium for quite some time. So we've really spent some time digging into this. I think some of the trades that exist in the construction industry include things like boilermakers and carpenters, welders, general laborers. There's a whole wide variety. And within each one of those occupational classifications, there are various levels of education that are required. And so it's important to understand how the industry is structured in order for you to effectively work well with those employers and the training systems that exist within that. So to help us understand that a little bit better today, we've assembled an expert panel that includes Earl Buford, who is known to most of us. He is the President and CEO of Partner for Work. Earl has a long history. I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm going to let him tell his story. But he has a long history of working in workforce development and spent a lot of time working specifically in the construction industry at one of the oldest industry intermediaries in the country. So welcome, Earl. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining him from the Pittsburgh region is Jeff Nobers. He's the Executive Director of the Builders Guild of Western Pennsylvania. And Jeff also has a long history working in the construction industry. He and Earl have been actively engaged in building a really robust partnership in the Pittsburgh region. And I'll let him tell you a little bit about the role that he plays in terms of connecting industry and the public system together in a way that helps us to grow the diversity of candidates in the building trades in that region. Next up, we have Tracy Griffith, who is the HR Outreach Manager for the Walbeck Group. And Tracy has lots and lots of years of experience working in the construction industry. She started out working at WRTP Big Step with Earl, and is now working at a contractor and working to continue to build the diversity pipeline within the construction industry. And then lastly, we have Henry Hurt, who owns Hurt Electric. And Henry has, again, lots and lots and lots of experience in the construction industry. He is a graduate of the Big Step program. And so he will share sort of his perspective and experience across that whole spectrum. So I want to get started by just kind of tossing it over to folks one by one here. So Earl, as someone who's gone through the process of developing and maintaining these partnerships and helping to replicate them from one area to the next, what is it that you would want people to understand about developing partnerships within the construction industry?
Thank you, Tracy, and good morning, everyone. It's sunny here in Pittsburgh. I just want to make sure I add that, make sure you know that. I think a high of 75 today. That aside, I've been very fortunate in 20 plus years of work in workforce development to kind of work on both sides of this conversation. One, now I'm on the workforce support side, so providing support and funding and other services that help enhance industry-led programming, but also had the chance to practice from the other side on the development side, working with key industry partners and key community partners and politicos and around public policy work to make sure that construction in particular is a viable option, but also an economic option. So I say all that to just, there are some key things that you always start with. And I think a lot of the background, especially for workforce boards, when it comes to any kind of construction work or construction programming is too hard. It's too hard work, so people don't want to do that, or it's too hard to get in because of a variety of barriers that are there. And while all those things are true at times, it's actually one of the easier ones to, I think, as a workforce board to connect to, but you have to think about the relationships and how to navigate and build those relationships. And also what does it mean as a board, as a workforce board, to make this a viable industry partnership model that you want to support, that you want to fund, that you want to see your folks from your American Job Centers walk into these great jobs and apprenticeships. So the number one for me is the relationships, and that can be done a variety of ways. Fortunate for me, having worked on the workforce side of it and worked directly with industry, I always like to start there. So for instance, my board of directors, I think we have about 4 or 5 individuals, including Jeff Nobers, directly from the industry who sit on our board of directors. So it's a governance strategy that we've decided was important to our workforce area, especially because construction is one, if not the largest, one of the largest sectors and industries in our local area. So I think we have Jeff, who runs the Builders Guild, and he'll explain what that is. We have the president of the building trades. We have one of the contractor associations. We also have one of the major general contractors, et cetera, et cetera. So we started from that end and decided to build our investment into the industry from those conversations, from their needs. So that's how I work, based on my experience and based on how to get things done and starting to build those relationships. So I said a lot to answer a simple question, but it's really about building relationships.
Great, thanks, Earl. So Jeff, can you share a little bit about your why and some of the work that you've been doing through the Builders Guild in partnership with the board?
Well, the Builders Guild, just so everyone understands, is a labor management organization. It's focused solely in the non-residential construction industry. So the membership are the construction trade unions and 9 contractor associations, as well as the Building Trades Council. So obviously you have that built-in audience that understands universally the issues the industry faces in many respects. And, you know, we were running a program that, you know, had fits and starts to it. It wasn't, we were supporting it. It was run by another organization. And there were multiple other programs in the market. Excuse me. And I think the thing that we really came down on And then Earl got here to take over Partner for Work, which, I've said it 100 times, was a godsend for Partner for Work, because he's, dramatically changed that organization and how it functions, and its ability to really get things done. Is that none of these programs really understood what we needed as trade unions or as contractor groups. And I also found it amazing. A lot of people just didn't understand just how that whole apprenticeship thing worked. They were purporting to train people to go into apprenticeships, yet really didn't understand the apprenticeship. Or to Earl's point, they view them as barriers. We view them as just a matter of course if you want to work in the industry, like having a driver's license, having access to a vehicle. It's a very different industry. You're not going to the same office every day. You're not going to the same place every day. And you have to be mobile, and you have to have an ability to get there. So I think that's something in working with Earl, he and I working together with my board and really showing them how we could put together a more viable and functioning program. And they accepted that. And I think our results to date, we're still only into our second year of this as the Builders Guild, but our placement and retention rates are well over 80%. And we have a guarantee. If you get through the program, we guarantee we're going to get you into an apprenticeship or as a direct hire to a contractor. So, I think those are the important types of things. I know the guarantee is a hard thing to get, but really having that relationship and pipeline to be able to get folks working, at the end of it all, you can train everybody all you want. If you don't have a career path for them when the training's done, then it really was just all for naught.
Yeah.
It's
a really good.
Can I just
Go ahead,
follow
Earl. Yeah.
one thing Jeff said? I mean, he said it lightly and loosely, but the industry has guaranteed placement. I said it in all capital letters, guaranteed placement to any of his graduates from the program. And in consult with that, I, as a workforce board, we have pledged a $250,000 investment to that program every year to support that guaranteed investment. So I wanted to make sure that everyone out there heard the investment the industry's making, the investment we're making as a workforce board to make this happen.
So we can probably circle back to this, but I did want to just kind of put a fine point on this last thing, and that is that so Intro to the Trades is recruiting folks from, who are the folks who are coming into Intro to the Trades? Is it sort of the generally speaking, the folks that the construction industry might normally see coming in, or is there more diversity coming in through Intro to the Trades?
No, our particular focus is we recruit heavily in minority or, whether you want to call them disadvantaged, marginalized neighborhoods and communities. About 85% of our participants are minorities or women. And, that has helped us, be able to grow some of that diversity within the industry. And that's really our focus. And what we find is with a lot of these folks, they have the work ethic, they have the desire to succeed. I think part of it just was they never really perceived construction as a viable career path for themselves, or they had misinformation about what the industry was like. And, and hey, be the first to admit, the construction industry was not always the most welcoming industry. There was a time when if you weren't a relative, you weren't getting in. And that is far from the case today. We've had graduates that went from unemployment or part-time jobs who are now in the electricians union, the operating engineers, carpenters, and these are very lucrative, high-paying career paths for folks. So, that's really our focus is to be able to build that diversity and offer those opportunities to folks that normally may not be able to pursue them or may just not even know they're there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Thanks, Jeff. So Tracy, you know, as an HR professional, why are partnerships important from your perspective?
Good morning, everyone. What's interesting, I go back, 20 some years with Earl, with Big Step WRTP, watching people try to figure out how and why partnerships are important. Watching contractors shrink away from working with workforce boards, watching people try to figure out how to meet these things called workforce requirements on projects. Having worked and been in the world wearing a different hat and coming on board with Wallback Group as a HR representative, where my focus is outreach, strategic initiatives, I don't know how contractors have operated and been successful without having industry partnerships. For me, the heart of it is, if you have labor management, you pull them in a room, you figure out what's needed, you have an intermediary, in my world, it's WRTP Big Step, that's tied to the workforce board. You have that tied together. And I think Earl hit it, Jeff touched on it, and people look at industry and say, what is it you need? What is it you need to, what are you looking for in your workers? What is your workforce looking like in the next 3 years, the next 5 years? As a contractor, our advantage, we can partner and strategically recruit and train through pre-apprenticeship people to come into our industry. We're saving money. We're able to retain people. Some of the screening is done prior. Just like what Jeff is doing in his program, there's screening education done prior to somebody being thrown on a job site and really not understanding the world of construction. For me as an HR professional, I go to our intermediary and I work with our workforce board and WRTP Big Step to create a diverse pipeline. And I think wearing the hat that I wear, it makes us a more competitive contractor. We can meet our workforce requirements and we can compete and change the look of our workforce and what the workforce is going to look in the next 20 years. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Tracy. So Henry, you've seen this from the very early years of your professional career, coming into the Big Step program and completing that, and then moving into the field, and then into leadership within the WRTP Big Step organization, as well as starting and running your own business. So what's your why? Why are you still in this space, and what gets you motivated to continue to do this work every day?
Well, good morning, everybody. Mine is a long story, but I'm not going to tell it. I'm just going to tell you that I benefited from the direction of Big Step in getting into the industry that I didn't know anything about. And I think it's ironic that I've come full circle and sit on a board of directors at Big Step. And a fun fact, I sat on the board of directors that hired Earl as the director of Big Step there. So I have a lot of points of touch there. But the reason why I still do what I do is because I benefited from it directly. I've seen many others benefit from it in a positive way. I see how it connects to the industry, not just electricians, but all of the different trade professions. And I want to make sure I make that clear. Trade professions. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't think we're professionals, but we are. And so we want to behave that way. But at the same time, without the connection to an organization that's a pre-apprenticeship trainer, like Partner for Work and Big Steps and the WRTPs of the world, as a contractor, first, I can say that I've been almost everywhere in our industry. There's only a couple different positions that I haven't held. And right now, I sit on the Big Step Board of Directors, the governance board for both organizations. I'm the co-chair of the Apprenticeship Council in the state of Wisconsin. I'm a past president of NECA in Milwaukee area. I sit on MATC, the Technical College Advisory Committee for electricians and such. And I am also the committee chairman for electrical apprentices training in Milwaukee area. I get a lot of different touches with organizations that interconnect. And I can see that it's necessary to have a partnership with a career apprenticeship organization, because that's where we get our people. Even if I don't get somebody directly from that organization, I'll pick that person and I will direct them to them so that they can be ready to work for me. Without that, I'm not going to get the people that I need to work for Hurt Electric. I'm not going to have a person who has no information regarding the language of construction or construction industry. They have no idea what the tools are. And they don't appreciate how math and reading come into play in our professions. So without that partnership, I'd be stuck looking somewhere for people to do the work that I need to get done as Hurt Electric.
That's great. Thank you for that, Henry. So I think that one of the things that is clear here is that we've got a group of folks who have spent lots of time digging into this work and really understanding it from a variety of vantage points, and brings that expertise to us today to help us start to think about what it might look like to operationalize or broaden construction industry partnerships in our local areas. And so to sort of move into that direction, we're going to ask a series of questions. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to respond to the question in the chat box. We will summarize these responses as we kind of move forward here through the conversation. And your answers will also help us to make some decisions about how we want to move forward in terms of additional conversations around the construction industry. So the first question that we're asking our attendees to respond to is whether or not you have a relationship with your local building trades. Do you have a relationship with your local building trades? If you can go ahead and answer in the chat area, that would be great. And the next question we're curious about is whether or not you have, there are funds that support that partnership. Is there an investment in the partnership? Because I think these are two things. The relationship is important, and investing in that relationship is also important. So do you currently have funds that support the partnership? And then do you have a construction representative on your board? So those are three really important questions. If you guys wouldn't mind throwing your answers into the chat box, we will collect that information and use it to help inform how we move forward with this conversation in the future. And it may inform some of the questions that you have for us later when we open up the Q&A. All right, we can go ahead to the next. There you go. Thank you so much. So now I think we're going to dig in a little bit here to some examples of industry partnerships that have had pretty significant impact in two of our local areas. We're focused here in this conversation on the work that's been done in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area, as well as in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania region. So to get started, I'm going to toss it to Tracy. Just wanted to get a sense from you about some of the ways that you have worked with WRTP Big Step and that partnership in between Walbeck Group and WRTP.
Sure thing. Could I wear a different hat for a moment though?
Yep.
I'm
Yes.
gonna put back on my WRTP Big Step hat because I'm looking at this screen and I'm seeing some of the major projects, and I just wanna touch base when you're seeing those projects. One of the things back when, years ago when Earl and I worked together and years, not to age either of us, it really was a development from the bottom up. And you're going to hear the word investment a lot. And the difficulty we had was the workforce boards at the time would develop training. They would get dollars, training would be developed, and it would be, organizations would say, we call it the train and pray model. We're going to run this class, we're going to pray, and we're going to hope that a contractor at the end picks up. Henry's chuckling. He and I have talked about this. We've talked through years about how that model, it has the best of intentions, but it's not a successful model. What's a successful model is when you pull in and have an organization like Big Step who can have a trusted relationship, work with the different trades and contractors to say, oh boy, we have these projects, developers are putting workforce requirements on them, and they're not bending on them. And contractors and unions are going to have to talk the talk and walk the walk. Oh no, what are we going to do? And so the hat I'm wearing right now is to just mention, specifically to the Northwest Mutual Tower, what an industry partnership that existed between Big Step WRTP, the developers, the contractors, having a representative from the intermediary WRTP Big Step, which was myself at the time. I was able to attend the principal meetings, and Henry's company had work on the project at that time. I would see him there. But from the beginning, to have somebody to say, what are your needs? That's what a contractor, the workforce boards, if they want to connect and get into the world of construction, is understanding what the contractor needs, how apprenticeship works, how you pull it together. In the Milwaukee area, we're lucky, WRTP Big Step existed. They sat at the table, but the Northwest Mutual Tower project was huge because it was the first time ever they said, we're going to do 40% per trade. 40% of City of Milwaukee residents per trade, per craft on this project. And Henry, I don't know if you remember, but I think you even did it. You went, but you had been developing, knowing, being strategic as a contractor, knowing what that's looking like. But for some of the trades who workforce requirements were a little bit new, or not really having to be held accountable and do what they were supposed to do in this world, they didn't know how to do it. And so having, the workforce board put dollars up, there was training dollars. WRTP Big Step worked with these developers, and out of it was one of the trades in particular, it was glaziers. They had, there's no way they could meet the workforce requirement. Smaller union. They said, there's no way we can do all this glass, and if Northwestern Mutual is great. The building's gorgeous. But what they were willing to do, and this is where industry partnership comes into play. WRTB Big Step sat in a room, the general contractor sat in a room, the union sat in a room and said, how can we benefit City of Milwaukee and be creative to make sure that there's city residents on this project in a different way? And what the union at that time was willing to do was to redevelop a classification that existed within their contract that they didn't use, to put workers to work putting together the windows at a site where City of Milwaukee workers could go through a training at Big Step, which the workforce board funded. There were dollars put forth. Training was developed to help the City of Milwaukee residents get some basic skills. They opened up a whole building for the development of the windows, the contractor, the subcontractor, and numbers were met. So workforce requirements were met in ways that they didn't think could be met. Out of it, I don't have the numbers with me anymore, but there was probably about 35% of those workers that worked at this facility got into apprenticeship. it was, the long-term goal was apprenticeship, and others went into, construction or other avenues as a result of the work. That project would not have been successful without industry partnership and the right people being in the room, having those conversations, saying what is needed, what do we have to do. So I wanted to mention that, because for the city of Milwaukee, and not that the Modern and Fiserv aren't big or aren't important, but that was such a sticky project with Northwestern Mutual, because you had to deal with union issues and how do we make this work and have union members and give them benefits and pay them well? Because what you don't want is the old adage of, we're going to put somebody in a job and pay them $12 an hour to hold a broom. And Henry, jump in on there. Is that not what was kind of the history in Milwaukee as a contractor years ago?
That was the rub. Many projects that aren't listed on here that did not prepare those workers for success. They gave them a job and just said, stand over there for 40 hours a week. And then after the project was done, they were gone. They were not to be seen. So the retention wasn't there. But with the project that you mentioned there at the Northwestern Mutual Tower, as well as the Fiserv Forum, I believe the RPP participation was in the 50s, the high 50s percentage. Some contractors got more than that. And so it became almost a badge of, look what I did, as far as the participation was concerned. And right now, I can tell you one of the contractors that was on the Fiserv Forum has gotten another project here in town, the Komatsu headquarters. That contractor has pledged 80% participation. And it is because they kept the people that they had at the Fiserv working. So that now they are part of the team on the new job. And that's the goal. And many of those persons, not all of them, but many of those persons benefited from the prep work that WRTP Big Step did with them to get them ready to go to work so that they could be successful.
Earl, do you remember way back when there were workforce requirements put on projects? And what do you see in the changes with that in your time?
I'll make 2 points for my past knowledge of these projects. So when the industry partnership was set up through WRTP Big Step, whatever years those were, there was also funding from industry to support that effort. And so that made, this is a really important distinction, that made the organization the go-to arm for labor management in the greater Milwaukee area. So in essence, it became the legal first source for the industry. So while there are other groups doing work, they knew they had to work through and work with this entity to get folks ready and into, say, a project or to the JTCs, et cetera. The other thing I want to note about Northwestern Mutual and even the Fiserv is, and I'm going to focus on the funding side of this, is that it was a multiple blended funding approach. So the owners and the city of Milwaukee put money into a tax incremental district. So there was workforce dollars that worked with the workforce board and WRT Big Step as in this combined effort. The board also put another, I believe, $250,000 on the table. So another investment by the workforce system into this partnership model. And there are some other resources that were attached. So I think the thing to walk away from here is back to the 3 points Tracy asked in the evaluation. Do you have relationships, or are you willing to build relationships? And also look at resources. What you have to put resources on the table in order to have have a voice, but also to make sure these things go forward. So I just want to make that point. I believe that project ended about 45%, which is well over the 40% required. So,
Tracy, the other thing to answer your question, because I know that didn't answer your question directly, you had said, how in my role are we, you doing things, right? What am I doing? And so one of the things I wanted to say that has benefited our company, Wallback Group, is I can go having an intermediary and having a strong relationship. I sit on, Henry probably didn't even list half of the committees that he is involved in. He and I tag team on different committees. I sit on WRTB Big Steps, two of their advisory committees. I'm also on the State Apprenticeship Council and also a subcommittee, and all of these are, the purpose is to create diversity into the construction industry and create a pipeline using innovative strategies and being able to circle back to the Workforce Board and our partners. And so what's been fun for me, and I love our company because I work for a company that says, Tracy, just make it happen. And so I have a lot of flexibility and fun with what I do. So I'm going to go where I'm getting my money's worth. So when we talk about investment as a contractor, I'm going to work with organizations where I'm getting an impact, where I'm seeing a result and it's benefiting my company. That's just, there's no other way to say it. Sometimes people will show up because they have to at places. We invest heavily in WRTP Big Step in a lot of different ways. And what we did about a year and a half ago is we had some work coming up in an area in Wisconsin. And we had some challenges getting city residents in that area into our company. It was a higher poverty, it's a challenged area. Construction, I guess, isn't attractive, it's not sexy. You can talk about the pay, but Jeff mentioned earlier, you talk about, you know, we look at it as you just need a driver's license, you need a car. Some people say barrier, some people say this is just what you need. And so you're running into all of this and saying, but we want to bid on this work. How are we getting these people into our company, into the industry, meeting workforce requirements? Part of it is I have a very strong trust relationship and years relationship. And we haven't talked about trust, but when you're building industry partnerships and labor management relationships and bringing people in the room, the integrity and trust that goes along with building it is really important. I'm going to work with those that I trust and that I can count on. And so I went to WRTP Big Step and said, listen, we're going to have needs. I'd like to run a training class through WRTP Big Step. Now, here's the catch. As a contractor, I could run that myself. I have enough knowledge. We could absolutely do it. But because WRTP Big Step is a certified pre-apprenticeship, you know, there's training dollars that can fund a class. They know what we need, and that's what I use them for. I said, here's what I want to do is have a big recruitment event, a training class where my superintendents and our foremen will teach different parts of the classes. That's another type of investment. We're taking our workers into the class. And we're going to hire people that complete it. So it goes back to what Jeff said earlier, what Earl said, the investment of a contractor being able to hire. So what we were able to do is run a training class, and it was in the middle of winter. And we were prepping for our spring work. We're a heavy highway road building contractor. So we were ramping up and we planned it strategically. What are our workforce needs? What do we need? Spring, here's what we're going to have. We hired those that graduated. And all of those people that graduated were able to be new apprentices with our company. And so, Tracy, when you said to me, you know, how are you using, you know, WRTP Big Step? How does this, I use WRTP Big Step and industry partnership every day in my role. And I think as a contractor, you're smart. You're smart if you're using it and if you're able to strategize and develop new initiatives as a result of it. So I'm going to toss it back.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think it's a really great segue. You know, Earl, you've had a lot of experience in Milwaukee, leading WRTP Big Step, and then moving over to the board in Milwaukee and really formalizing in a very intentional way the relationship between that intermediary and the public workforce system as a way of demonstrating how these industry partnerships can really come together so that the public and private sectors are working hand in hand. When you went to Pittsburgh, you really took that experience with you and then applied components of that to the work that you're building now in the Pittsburgh region. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Pittsburgh now and how you guys are working together to really cement those relationships?
Well, first of all, Trace, you gave me way too much credit there. I came to Pittsburgh with some ideas on how the workforce board could get connected to what's happening in the Pittsburgh market. But as the first thing I mentioned earlier was the fact that our board of directors consisted of individuals from the industry. So I'll tell the story. And Jeff referenced it earlier, but there's another group that was doing the pre-training under this initiative, and Jeff called me in support of them, and we had a deep philosophical conversation. And what came out of it was we both made the commitment. You know what? We're going to ramp this thing up. Jeff was going to take the onus of leading the industry into a major pre-apprenticeship strategy, which is intro to trades. And I said, you know what? If you take that initiative and get the president of building trades and get the major contractors, get your local AGC master builders on board, I will make the funding commitment. And so you can call it lucky, you can call it like-minded, or strategically we were on the same page and made the commitment to get on the same page to move this forward. And so it's really, and then, you know, as a board, you know, we as we're building our own industry partnerships, sector strategies, whatever you want to call it, and obviously you can't do any of that without having construction. So to have that commitment and partnership with Jeff and all the right players, it allowed me to go to my board and say, we need to make sure we put aside each year in our budget the funds to support what's happening here, not to waver on that, not to lose commitment, but to stay focused on that. And our board was ready to sign up in a heartbeat. Now, as Jeff said, it's 2 years in, it's still building and growing. And while I think it's one of the premier programs already in the country, he'll tell you himself, there's a long ways to go. And that's a good thing. We're always looking to strive and advance it. And now we're talking about how to bring OJTs into this and how do we subsidize some of our contractors who are looking to hire graduates. So that's the next evolution in this conversation. As an urban workforce board, if there's one strategy we don't use very well, it's using our OJT resources to help our employers hire more and get folks that we in our systems into these great jobs. So I'll as my segue to give Jeff a little shine on that conversation.
But you know, Earl, what's funny about the OJTs was about a year ago when we had 3 or 4 of our graduates. We bring contractors into the classes, you know, whether they're heavy highway or, you know, regular building and construction, and actually talk to the graduates and get to the participants and get to know them. And, you know, many of them end up getting hired, if not by that contractor, they get moved into a union, then the contractor brings them over once they're in the apprenticeship. But I remember when Fay Contracting, they're doing a big project within the city near the arena development. And, you know, and they're under minority recruitment dictates and so forth. And they came and they met our students, and there were 3 or 4 folks they really liked, and they wanted to hire them. And we said, you know, let us help you with the on-the-job training funds. And they looked at us like we were aliens from another planet. I mean, they just had no clue about these funds. And once they understood that it was not that complicated of a process, and it was reasonably easy to do, you know, they really embraced that. And, you know, obviously they were going to hire those people regardless. But then what we did see is they were hiring people on other projects that didn't necessarily have these quotas on them, because they understood the value of the OJTs. They understood the value of hiring people that came out of our program. So, you know, I think the industry is just starting to learn those and understand them. But, you know, to Earl's point, I think what happened too is, as a workforce board, I was on the board of directors prior to Earl coming to Pittsburgh. And, you know, it was a different board then. The composition was somewhat different. The leadership was obviously different. And, you know, if the leadership of the workforce board doesn't embrace a certain industry, you know, that industry then tends to just drift away and figure, well, they're not interested in what we do or in trying to work with us, so we'll just go and do things the way we do things. And Earl got here, and I remember the first day we met, he asked me, he said, what do you think the problem is with construction training in this market? And I said, there's like 500 people that purport to be doing construction training and nobody knows what they're doing. And, you know, so that led to, you know, us really, you know, building that relationship and getting this done. So, you know, as time has moved forward here now, we have, you a variety of projects that do have, and ours aren't city resident quotas. Ours are their city resident minority quotas. So it's, it's not just a city resident, they're minority quotas. And so like the Civic Arena site, which, this has been a 12-year undertaking to get this built. And, it's gone round and round and back and forth. But, Earl got involved in these negotiations with the Pittsburgh Penguins, who own the development rights there. We've been involved with the Penguins in these conversations, and as well as the general contractors, of which there's 3 on this site. And, we came to a conclusion and agreement that the way we would do this is the Penguins are funding a big portion of the training. We will train them and vet them. And we then in turn refer these people to the contractors, the people that come through the program. And that's what folks they've committed to going to that project to come through the training class. And that's going to be their first posting, whether they're there for 6 months or 2 years, depending on, the scope of their particular trade or assignment, that's to get them started. And I think the hardest thing we had to deal with is we have a pretty big non-union contractor in the market who does a lot of work for, the Urban Redevelopment Authority and a lot of housing work. And, when he's put under these minority quotas, he says, yeah, that's fine, not a problem. And, he'll go into the neighborhood, he'll hire the appropriate number of folks, and really they're just on the job site doing honestly busy work for the most part. And when that project's done, those folks are done. And they're really no better off than they were before that project came into their neighborhood. And, what our goal is we want to get people to work on this site, and to the whole driver's license and vehicle thing we always talk about, put them in that position so when they're done there, they can go work on other projects and they can continue and build this career in the construction industry. And honestly, that was a difficult thing to convince some people of, that there's a definitive difference between what we're doing as the construction industry versus a singular contractor that has a very different interest in this than we do. So, I think it's, we have a program in place. This project is supposed to start in the first quarter of next year, regularly talking with the contractors. And even to that point, what the contractors agreed to, there are a couple of other programs that do this pre-apprenticeship in the city. And one of them, I'm actually on the board of directors of that one. And they teach very similar to what we teach. And, so again, their graduates will be eligible to go there, but the contractors have said, as long as you, the Builders Guild, the intro program, says, yes, we believe they're a viable candidate, they'll take them onto the job site. So I think it's also that working with some of the other training programs, that are doing it the way the industry needs it to be done to be able to achieve these goals.
Hey, Jeff, let me add one last point to that on the project, and I'll turn it back to Tracy. Gary, Jeff mentioned the other partners in the Pittsburgh market. So again, there's 7 other groups that do construction training or that are recognized, and we fund all of them. So really, the workforce board's at the table investing at a pretty high level here. So in order to build some synergy, we all meet regularly now, but 2, we're working on a pilot where we're trying to develop what we call referral funds. So for these other groups that are preparing individuals, even though they're not apprenticeship ready or industry ready, if they refer their candidates that can get into the trades, we will now start paying them a fee. We all know in this workforce game, it's about resources. So we're trying to work out that methodology and that model. But second, it also shows that they don't have to train everyone. They can go find good candidates who meet the basic requirements, and it's still a viable referral for them to get their folks ready. It doesn't be someone who's on their docket now. It could be someone they've trained 2 years ago, who's doing something else. So we're working on that model. It's not there yet, but we're excited about where that can go.
I think that really does frame up how these partnerships can be developed, how they're unique in each local area. So some of how things happen in Pittsburgh is different than how it happens in Milwaukee, and that's organic, and it's a part of, you know, that local flavor, if you will. So I think there are some consistencies though in terms of who gets engaged in partnerships and how they get organized. And Tracy, you touched on something that I think is really important. And I'd like for you guys to talk a little bit, and we'll maybe just do a quick round robin about the importance of building trust. And I think that people oftentimes will come to these sort of presentations and they'll have an idea about, I want to build an industry partnership around construction. And I want to be at the point where we're actively engaged with our major developers on a project that's coming up. And they don't necessarily understand the years and years and years of hard work that goes into establishing those relationships, building that trust. So what are some of those key points? How have you worked to build trust? And are there some lessons that you've learned along the way that folks would benefit from knowing what to avoid? So just I know this is a little bit of a left curve, but as questions are coming in, we want to kind of field them. So how have you built trust? And are there any lessons you've learned along the way that you would help advise people to think about either avoiding or head first into? And Earl, I'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, my own philosophy has been to find someone you can work with. If you're a workforce board or a practitioner, find someone you can work with and make sure you are a response to them. It's going to sound, you can take this any way you want. I never came in heavy-handed saying, you will do this, you must do this, because the door's going to get closed right away and you become adversarial. But if you really have to be cognizant on your end of how you approach the partnership and the relationship, and then also have a strategy. So if you're a workforce board, you want to have your board develop an industry partnership model, whether it's putting construction leaders on your board or forming an outside advisory council made up of key leaders, contractors, developers, community partner, however you want to do it. But I think that's the first step, and so that's how I traditionally built trust. But it's also, what do you do after once you get to the table? How do you continue to keep people at the table and also continue to keep movement? And then there's a lot of questions coming in. Someone asked about the return on investment. For me as a board, it's, my performance measurements are up. Now I have higher wage occupation and higher wage placements that have better Q2 closing and fourth quarter closings than we've had on other occupations. So from a business standpoint of what we do, it makes sense. From a equity standpoint of what we do, it makes sense, and I monitor, make sure that equity is also going through. So, Jeff and I have conversations all the time. Again, I found a partner who I can actually talk to. We've had tough conversations, we've had great conversations, but we have all those conversations and work through them. And so that's how you build trust, in my opinion, but also in my experience. But you got to find someone you can work with, and you have to be able to be a person that they can work with.
Yeah, Henry. Do you have any thoughts on how to build trust? And to kind of go to Earl's other point, there is a question about how you measure the return on investment. And so from your sort of wide vantage points, how have you seen trust work well? And what is the return on investment to keep you there?
Well, it's about being honest about what you think you need, and then listening to what can be provided. Nobody's going to give you the perfect worker. You got to realize that. Our job is to train people to do what we do. We can't expect them to come to us with all the experience. That's one of the big headaches that I think a lot of, should I say not a headache, but one of the impediments to having successful work placements in your companies, if you expect more out of them than they can actually give you or have. We have to realize that there's no mechanical history sometimes with workers, and our job is to help them gain that and compare what they know already to what you have, so that you can train them to do what you need them to do. But those partnerships, to build the trust, is like, if I were to hire somebody that came from like Big Step or a partner for work, and I constantly turned them around, not worked with them, not trained them, but then badmouth the organization, that's not going to build any trust. That's going to just be a fight. So you're not going to get what you think you're supposed to get. The other thing is to not be demanding. If I help them in the process by, if I vet that person, if I'm going to send somebody to that organization, if I do a mini vetting of them and say, okay, is this really what you want to do? Well, then, okay, if you do, then I'm going to send you here so that we can get you really ready to go. And you just turn around and come back to me. Now that helps everybody in the loop, because if you have pay for play programs, grants and things like that, I'm helping them with that pay for play, bad term, but that's what it is. But at the same time, the return on investment for me, I'm going to get somebody that's committed to working. I don't have to worry about wasting my time and spending money to try to train this person when they're really not interested in doing what they're sent to do. And it's about dollars and cents, no matter which side of the coin you're on. The apprenticeship prep organization has to spend the money to get them ready to go. They could spend that on somebody else. It's the type of person you're spending it on, not that person particularly that you're spending it on. On my side of the coin, it's the same thing. I need somebody like you, not necessarily you. So to have the commitment there from the organization and be able to trust that they're going to send me the person that I'm asking for is important, because this comes down to dollars and cents. It comes down to morale on job sites, because people have their own biases or thoughts about what this person is going to bring or not bring when they get there, whether or not, how much time are they going to have to spend? Are they going to have to hold their hand? All these other things come into play that can affect how that job's going to work. So I think being able to trust that prep organization is very important to the success of the hire, the success of the project, the success of the customer, because they're all connected together.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to sort of broaden this conversation about building trust and ROI into the context of sort of engaging underrepresented populations in general, and more specifically, really, how are we engaging women in construction? So it's a lifelong challenge that we all are aware of, but I think that there has been some really good efforts towards increasing that engagement of women. And so I'm going to bring it over to you, Tracy. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the efforts that are underway in the Milwaukee region to focus on helping to build not just the pipeline of women, but to really support women who are in the industry to stay in the industry and bring more women in?
Sure, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. So throw something at me if I talk too much, that could happen. One of the organizations I helped found and am part of, co-chair of, is Empower, which is a construction industry group of women who work in the field mostly, but also in professional positions in construction. It's a building trade group, and it started in the Milwaukee area, but it is expanding statewide. The purpose of this group is the real focus is to take the women that are in the industry, provide mentorship and help growth, promotions, different opportunities for women in construction, and help them get there. The other hat we wear, though, is a recruitment hat, is a mentoring hat, is an outreach hat. How do we make construction interesting and viable for women who may have children and don't have daycare, who want to ask questions about some of the challenges or things that they've heard in the industry, but don't know who to ask. And so that organization I'm having a blast with. Wallback Group is actively involved. It's also a partnership with WRTP Big Step. And so for me as a contractor, I wear a hat all the time when I'm out looking to bring women and minorities into our organization. And we've done very targeted recruitment events with WRTP Big Step and Empower, tied to having panels with people who are apprentices, journey workers, bringing women in to do these hands-on event and talk to other women who are thinking of going in. No offense to men who are participating, but if I was a younger or older, not touching on my age, female looking to get into the industry, I'm not going to want to come and talk to somebody who's near their retirement and say, hey, tell me what it's like to be a woman in construction, right? We want to market to what we want to bring into the industry. So we're changing that. We're putting women behind the table and over here to talk and pull these women in. For me as a contractor, I'm going to speak specific to how it benefited me last year. We did a big event with WRTP Big Step and Empower. We had a lot of women in the house. I think there were about 100-ish attendees to the event. I was part of a panel with some wonderful women in the industry who work in the field. And out of that event, I was able to interview and hire individuals who attended that event. And so for me as a contractor, I'm going in not just to say, hey, here's what it's like in my world. I'm going in to say, hey, we have opportunities. Let's talk about it. Let's get you through some training if you don't have any experience. And we will hire you if there's an opportunity. So we were able to, I believe we had 3 hires out of that event. One ended up backing out, unfortunately, because the road building hours didn't work with what her life was. And that's fair enough. You know, if we can get a handful of women over to us and grow them within our company, that's what we want to do. Inside of our company, we developed a Women of Walbeck group. So right now the focus is, you know, on our engineers, on our professional, what you would say professional staff, people who aren't necessarily in the field, and focusing how to retain and promote and offer support to women. And we are going to be developing a, we haven't called it anything yet, but a group for women in the field that I will tie into Empower and WRTP Big Step. The more women that are out there talking about what they do and offering support is how we're going to grow the industry. So those are a couple of the things that I'm doing particular to my company and with WRTP Big Step with Empower.
That's
Tracy,
great.
I think one thing that, well, Tracy Carey, that Tracy Griffith brought up was, you know, a lot of the recruiters and the folks that go out are, you know, nearing retirement age.
I saw you smile, Jeff, when I said that. I saw you go, oh.
Predominantly white males. And, you know, I don't know what the situation was like in Milwaukee, but what happened in Pittsburgh was you had, you know, this span of time, you know, as you go back through the 80s into the 90s, where, you know, even those that worked in the industry were pushing their kids to go to college. You know, you don't want to do what I do. You don't want to have to do this every day. And so you sort of lost this whole generation of, you know, potential workers in the industry. So, you know, our average age of a journeyman is 46 years old. So, you know, those are the most experienced people. Those are the people that are the council reps and so on and so forth. So, you know, that's who you have out there as the face of the industry. Now, that being said, that's starting to change because we're seeing more and more retirements, obviously. I mean, we'll lose about 15,000 people over the next 4 years to retirement. And we're working feverishly to backfill that in and bring apprentices in. And as that's occurring now, obviously, the younger folks are coming up in the ranks. So I think that's just sort of an organic evolution that has to happen. But you're absolutely right. You have to go out there you have to send people out to recruit that are like the people you're trying to recruit, because that's A, believable, and B, they understand that they're in the industry. And one thing I just wanted to mention that Henry had said about, when people come from a pre-apprenticeship class, they're not walking onto your job site as an electrician or a carpenter or an operating engineer. What we really try and instill in our program is the work ethic required to be successful in the industry. We help them, get up to speed on math, especially the types of math they're going to need in the particular trade they want to go into, because they are different. The electrician's test is a lot tougher than the cement mason's test, okay? So, they have to understand what those differences are. And the other big thing what we deal with too is just the drug-free aspect of the industry. And, so if you can get people prepared to really understand that as they walk onto that job site or into that apprenticeship, they have a much, much higher percentage of success. So, but as a contractor or as a union, even from the apprenticeship side, you have to understand, we're not sending them to you skilled and ready to go out there and function at a high level like a journey person. So I think that's important to remember.
Jeff, that's a really good point, and it goes back to what Henry said earlier. I think when we were talking about industry partnerships and what do you need to do to have a really good one? And one of the things Henry said was you have to listen. And so as a contractor, when I'm developing a training class, which we have also done all female training classes with WRTP Big Step, I'm trusting that the partners that I'm working with are listening to what my needs are. And I have to understand that I'm not going to get a brand new apprentice that has journey worker skills, that it's going to be up to our employees and our foremen and our journey workers on the job to train them up and to mentor them. But what we're getting is a partnership that is helping us screen candidates, give some information to candidates, share what it's like in the industry for women and minorities who say, oh, is construction an area I want to go with? Provide people from our company as a contractor that says, hey, here is what our organization looks like. We do have minorities, we do have females, and here are the things they're doing. Here, talk to them, connect, mentor, retain. It is a full circle. So that whole listening and building the trust, to me, is such a critical part of working with a industry partnership. I know that I'm getting something out of it. They know that I will trust in what they're doing, and I can hire that person. And if I have some challenges out of it, we're going to have that conversation, and we're going to talk about what I need as a contractor. And I think for the workforce boards, as they're getting dollars and figuring out, boy, what do I need to do? We have to develop things that it starts with that basic conversation. And Earl said it earlier, you talk to somebody, develop that relationship. And sometimes you have a beer or two, and sometimes you have 3 or 4 conversations. And when you start to understand what that person in that industry is looking for, suddenly a light bulb is going to go off, and that's where the magic happens.
I think that's a really great place to segue to some questions and answers from our attendees. And so we wanted to just open it up. I'm going to quiet myself because I've talked enough for today. And I'm going to hand the reins over to Laura, who's just going to facilitate the Q&A session. So I'm going to mute myself, and then Laura's going to come in. And if you have a question, Laura's going to tell you how to ask it, because I don't know the answer to that. So let me mute myself. Mute my. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes,
Yep, fantastic. Making sure we're good with saving space. So hi, everyone. I'm Laura, Director of Operations at Midwest Urban Strategies. And as you know, it's a pretty tight-knit family here, former member of WRTP Big Step a couple months ago. We do have the chat function going on right now. So if you have any questions, as you've heard the fantastic feedback from our panelists, how to develop a construction industry partnership. What does that really look like? What is the industry looking for? Please feel free to write your questions into the chat function. I'll have those here and we can read those aloud and go through that. And of course, panelists, anything else that you're thinking of that you wanted to share that we didn't quite get to, please feel free to share that at this time.
Hey, Laura, I want to take, so our good friend Megan Dursil has had her hand up for about an hour this session. So let's make sure we get Megan's question.
Hi, Megan.
Your computer itself, because Earl's talking and we can't hear him.
Hope she types it in.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's it. All right. Well, no, she had her hand up. We'll wait for her to type in the question then.
Mhm. Sharing. Able to talk, or I can look. Where'd she go? I see you lowered your hand, but if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat or the Q&A. We'd be happy to.
There's a question in the question and answer, Laura.
Here we go. Thank you. I want to hear your thoughts on unions and general contractors and getting them to the table. Yep. So I'll start. Why don't we kick that to Earl actually right away?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, I've been very fortunate. So when I was hired in 1999 to run Big Step, I was hired by the president of building trade. So if that's not a commitment, I don't know what is. But moving forward and keeping that. So when I came to Pittsburgh, and I mentioned getting a relationship with Jeff, and Jeff runs the Builders Guild, which is the labor management arm for the unionized industry here in Pittsburgh. So the building trades at the table, the general contractors at the table already. So again, for me, it was looking for who, instead of me seeking out the head of the master builders themselves, which we could have done also, or seeking out the building trade, I thought it was easier to go to the person who already has that group or those groups at the table. So that was me taking the moment to understand the industry and being strategic about it. So back to the question at hand, if your workforce board and the building trades president are on your board, go have a conversation with he or she about how their industry works and how your workforce board or workforce programming can be helpful or partner, or to support what they're already doing if they have a MC3 program in place or any of these other things that are out there. So again, I have a different approach to it. I'd rather sit down and use Tracy's approach and have a few beers with them and go, how do we work together? But again, as a workforce board, I also have resources I can bring to the table. Again, it makes the conversation a bit easier. So don't be afraid to be a funder in those conversations. Don't be afraid to be a partner in those conversations. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
And if I could jump in and add to that, I think oftentimes when people are developing partnerships, they'll have one or the other at the table. You may have a union representative and you forget about the contractor, or you have the contractor and you don't have the union. And being a union contractor, I'm going to say it's important that they both come to the table and you find what the mutual needs and goals are and collaborate, because the outcome is the same. Everybody wants a good wage, family sustaining jobs for their workers. We want to bring good people on. We're a union contractor. They're going to make a great wage. The unions have, you can't have an industry partnership with one and not the other. The contractors are the one hiring. The unions, they have their workers to bring on. So don't forget, when you're having the conversation, everybody looks at union and contractors like, oh boy, it's a terrible thing. It can be. I've been really lucky in the relationships we've had with the union trades in Milwaukee. Our contractor, we have great relationships with our 4 unions. You have to start the conversations, get the people in their room, identify what their common goals are and what they need to do for their industry, and you're going to find that common ground. As soon as you find it, jump on it. And that's where the relationship develops.
The only thing I'll add to that, and I'll be quiet. We're also doing a small amount, but some supportive service items with some of our locals and some of the JTCs in our area. So as they bring on new apprentices, if they're from my area, we can look at what supportive services we have in our portfolio that can be appreciated and supported. So we're funding the pre-apprenticeship side. We're also having conversations about using OJTs, and then also how to use some of our supportive service resources also to support apprentices, even in some journeyman situations that are from our workforce area. So again, just there's a lot of ways to do this. It's not just one way, my point.
For the contractor side and general contractor side, you have to get them to understand why they should do this. There's a direct benefit to them because the contracts are written for the general contractor or the prime contractor. They are the ones responsible for the requirements. And what they'll do is if they don't think they can handle it at their level, then they'll impress the subcontractors to do that. But everybody has to understand the why. And once you get them to understand that, they'll come to the table ready to participate.
Let's see, more questions? Let's go on. We can't hear you, Laura.
We still can't hear you. I could read your lips maybe, but I don't think everybody else can.
Well, while she's getting it together, the question, I like this question from Maurice, about utilization of city tax incremental district dollars or tax incremental financing dollars. I mentioned earlier in Milwaukee, I know they used it on Northwestern Mutual project, also on the Bucks Arena, and in Pittsburgh, there are some conversations with the with our Urban Redevelopment Authority about the use of TID and TIF district resources, and I think Jeff and I are ready for that because one, you know, we, as Jeff mentioned, the Pittsburgh Penguins project, you know, that owner put money resources on the table, and we matched that as a board, and then as TIF and TID come together, we are ready to do really to match that with the blended funding model. So I'm all in favor of that public financing coming together and putting workforce resources in the human resource agreement of those financing items. And as a board, we are ready to sit at the table and say, how can we blend our resources and blend the programs into that? It's very important that happens. Sorry, Jeff.
Can I answer the question there from Sharon Watkins? How do you encourage support small contracting firms that are interested in participating in OJT programs? Oh man, that is the way for a small contractor to, number one, hire people that they can use to grow their company. It's also a perfect way for that contractor to train that person to do it their way. They're going to get the base OJT, or not OJT, they're going to get the base information in a classroom situation. But the OJT is the most important part. That's where they get to apply what they think they've learned, but it's also where that contractor has his or her own specific way of doing something that they can impress upon that person. That's the reason, that's what helps small contracting firms to grow. And that's the name of the game, grow. And if you can train them to do what you need them to do, and they can grow that knowledge, now you've got somebody who can be a leader in your company, and they can train other people because they know what to do. And they're going to be similar in how they think, their ages may be similar, they may come from a similar background, but that's exactly what you want small contractors to be able to benefit from.
I just want to add, oh, go ahead, Jeff, please, go ahead.
I was just going to say to Henry's point, and we touched on it earlier, you know, we laugh about it at our board meetings, but one of our board members actually took all the acronyms that you all in workforce development use and wrote them out in English so the rest of us understood what you were talking about. And I think that's a critical thing as you're engaging, whether it's a contractor, the trade union, really anybody, any industry, is we don't all understand all these terms. We have we come into it thinking it's very complicated and confusing, and it can be. So I think the one thing you have to show, especially to a smaller contractor, is that this is not a daunting task to do. I think they often recognize a benefit, but they don't necessarily have the manpower and the time to deal with a lot of paperwork and reporting. So I think that's something that's important.
Actually, Jeff, I'm glad you said it that way, because I think even with Sharon's question, we have two different interpretations of OJT in this panel. Henry, in kind of Henry, where OJT is how you train people on the job training. In the workforce board world, it's a resource, it's a wage subsidy resource we provide. So even in this conversation, it means two different things. So
yeah, that binder that you guys have put together, you could make money off it. You know, if you're looking for something to do on the side, Jeff.
And there's new ones every day.
Right.
You know, but what's interesting about that too is that one of the ways you mentioned about paperwork and that kind of thing, that can be huge for a small contractor. So if there's some things that you can do to help them get it filled out, I mean, there's hourly tracking programs, there's other forms and things that they would need to fill out if they're going to participate on some of these TIFs or TID projects, or even the projects that have the requirement of participation. Some of those forms are like, oh my God, how am I going to fill this thing out? You know, so you want to support them, get somebody that gets familiar with all those forms that they can help them fill them out.
yeah, great point, Henry. I just want to bring up, and especially for our friends who are in at the workforce boards. So there's always been this misconnect in urban workforce boards, where we are really good at providing, using our training account funds and our training vouchers, and we are reluctant to use OJTs for anything more than really manufacturing, maybe healthcare. So I just want to put out to everyone, use your OJTs and your wage subsidies more than you have. You're really going to get a benefit. Our non-urban boards or rural boards are really good at utilize. Suburban boards are great at utilizing OJT, less than training vouchers. We use more of the training side, and for a variety of reasons. You know, we're from a training world, so we put those roundings out. But I just want a different conversation for another time. But I think as a strategy, we have to really start using those OJT wage subsidies a lot more than we have. So and
for the workforce board attendees on the panel today, those that are listening, and I think Henry just said it, I'm going to speak as a contractor as well. When you're looking to get contractors vested in something, or how do you get contractors involved, when you do things to make our world easier, whether it's filling out the forms that Henry mentioned, navigating some of the things that we don't have time to, or that we don't understand, and we can trust that we're getting the information, and you're making things a little bit easier, you're going to pull contractors in. They're going to see results then, whether it's using the OJT dollars, whether you're trying to sell something new. I use the word sell because that's kind of what you have to do with employers sometimes. If you're showing them doing some of that work, some of the footwork, and just say, hey, here's what we need from you, and help them get there, kind of take their hand, you're going to get contractors, employers jumping a little quicker.
I think that is a perfect place for us to segue to the closeout here. I wanted to just take a second and thank our panelists. You guys have been gracious with your time and with your knowledge and information. We're so grateful that you took the time to talk with us today, and we will be reaching out for additional information and perhaps a follow-up session at some point in the future. So just a heads up and a warning. For our attendees, do want to let you know that we will be sending out a survey to get a sense about what you learned today, what you wish you would have learned today, what you thought worked well, and what you think we could do better. And we really would appreciate it if you would send that survey back in, because this process of creating these conversations is something that we're committed to doing, and we want to make sure that it's meeting your needs. And Earl put out a teaser there. You guys didn't know it, but we're going to be hosting a Zoominar next month focused on the job training and how workforce boards can think about more creative ways to use OJT resources within industries where we have not necessarily used them before, or in creative ways that help employers ease into the process of using that resource. So be on the lookout for that next Zoominar come out, and please sign up and join us. And again, please complete that survey and get that back to us. And if you have questions after the fact, feel free to email those in to Amber, who sent out the original invite, and we will get those organized and answered for you. Thank you all for being here today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you to all. Nice seeing everyone again.
Thanks. You too.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a great
you.
day.
Henry. Bye,
Got it.
Tracy.
Good to see you.
Bye,
Bye, Earl.
guys.
Bye-bye.